Have you ever wondered why a woman's silence disturbs a man more than her screams? Why her retreat echoes louder in his soul than any of her tears ever did? There comes a moment, not sudden, but slow, deliberate, silent, when a woman grows too quiet. Not out of defeat, but awakening. And in that quiet, he begins to unravel. He doesn't notice it at first. The change is subtle, delicate, like the first chill before winter arrives. She still smiles. She still cooks, still answers. But something invisible has slipped out of reach, her warmth, her availability, her invisible yes. Where she once softened, she now observes. Where she once responded, she now withdraws. And though her body remains, her essence, the soul he never fully held, begins to vanish. At first, he mistakes it for mood. Perhaps she's tired. Maybe she's hormonal. He tells himself she'll come around, that she always does. But this time, she doesn't. Because this time, she isn't waiting for him to see her. She has begun to see herself. Carl Jung called this moment individuation, the psychic birth of the true self. When the persona, the mask she wore to make him feel safe, loved, needed, begins to peel away. When she stops bending herself into shapes to fit his expectations. When she confronts her own shadow and realizes that her silence isn't emptiness, it's wisdom, and this is where he starts to lose control, not of her, but of the illusion he had of himself. He believed he was the sun. That she orbited him. That her moods, her voice, her light, her body, all of it existed to affirm his identity. But when she stops reacting, stops explaining, stops trying to be understood, he's forced into unfamiliar territory, his own emotional nakedness. He no longer knows where he stands. Because she, the mirror he once looked into for validation, has gone still. Because it forces him to feel everything she once carried for him. There's a reason her silence lingers in his bones long after she's gone. It wasn't the absence of her voice that haunted him, it was the presence of his own reflection in the void she left behind. You see, most men don't fear losing her body. They fear losing their sense of self in the absence of her attention. And that's the wound she unknowingly exposes, that without her constant affirming energy, he doesn't know who he is. Carl Jung would say this is the collapse of the persona, the mask. The identity he wore when she smiled at his jokes, forgave his silence, softened his edges. When she stops feeding that illusion, he is left face to face with something raw, unfamiliar, and deeply uncomfortable, his shadow. It's not her fault that she saw through the game, it's not cruelty that she stopped performing, it's not manipulation that she withdrew, it was clarity. She realized she could not heal where she was being hurt, she could not expand where she had to shrink, and most of all, she could not continue loving someone who mistook her soul for a supply of comfort, so she went still. And in doing so, she became a mirror. Not one that flatters, but one that reflects. She showed him not who she was, but who he had always been in her presence. And when that reflection grew quiet, it triggered the storm he had kept buried his whole life. You see, it's easy to love a woman who makes you feel strong, it's easy to desire a woman who makes you feel needed, but to stand before a woman who asks nothing, who holds her silence like a crown, who doesn't chase, doesn't plead, doesn't prove, that requires you to meet yourself, and most men have never been taught how. What he thinks is rejection is really revelation. He may say, she changed. He may tell his friends, she became cold. He may convince himself, she lost interest. But in truth, she woke up, and that awakening had nothing to do with another man, or a sudden shift in affection, it had everything to do with a slow death of self-abandonment, because she gave. And gave. And gave, until she realized he was never loving her, he was loving the version of himself reflected in her devotion. That's the part he misses, not her, but the emotional pedestal she put him on, the way her eyes told him he mattered, even when he didn't try, the way her energy wrapped around his flaws and made him feel whole. He misses being loved beyond his efforts, and now that she no longer offers that mercy, he feels the emptiness that was always there. Long before she arrived, she didn't leave to be chased, she left to come home to herself, the world loves to frame female silence as manipulation, she just wants attention. She's playing games. She wants him to suffer. But no, sometimes, a woman doesn't want to be chased, she wants to be left alone, not out of bitterness, but because peace has become more important than being understood. Jung spoke often about withdrawal as the first step of transformation. When the psyche begins to turn inward. When the soul says, no more leaking energy. No more seeking outside what must be healed within. That's what she's doing now, not closing off, but closing in. She's listening to the voice she silenced for too long, she's tending to the wound she covered up with pleasing, she's remembering who she was before she made herself smaller to fit inside someone else's story, and if he's wise, he'll stop chasing her, and begin chasing himself, because this isn't a love story, it's an initiation, one she passed through with grace. And one he will only survive if he stops asking where she went, and starts asking why he never truly met her when she was right there. It doesn't happen all at once. The realization drips in slowly, like cold water hitting warm skin. At first, he tells himself this is just a phase. That she's just figuring things out. That she'll return once she calms down, once she misses him enough, once she realizes no one will love her like he did. But as the days turn to weeks and the weeks into silence, a deeper truth sinks in, she's not coming back, not because she hates him, not because she found someone else, but because she found something far more powerful, herself. This is when the panic really sets in. Not the dramatic, movie-style heartbreak. But the quiet collapse of certainty. The moment he realizes that the thing he thought he could always come back to. The heart that once held him so gently. Now belongs to someone else, her. She has reclaimed it, not out of revenge, out of necessity. Now he sees what he was blind to before, he starts to remember things differently. Her softness, once dismissed as neediness, now feels rare. The way she listened. The way she anticipated his silences. The way she celebrated his smallest wins. It wasn't ordinary. It was sacred, but he didn't know how to receive that kind of love, because he had never offered it to himself, so he mistook it for weakness. Took it for granted, and now he sees her strength for what it truly was, not the ability to stay, but the courage to walk away without explanation. Carl Jung warned us about this, that until you make the unconscious conscious, it will rule your life and you will call it fate. He thought she was just emotional. He thought he was just being himself. But now he sees, she was the mirror. And he smashed it, not with cruelty, but with ignorance. He tries to reach back, but it's too late. At first, it's small. A message. A memory sent. A song shared, thinking of you. Hope you're okay. I miss us. But there's no reply. Or worse, a polite one. Kind, but distant. The tone that says, I've forgiven you. But I'm no longer available for who you used to be. And that's when he really breaks, because now, he's not being punished, he's being met with peace, and peace, when you're still chaotic inside, feels like punishment. He realizes she doesn't want revenge, she doesn't want closure, she doesn't want to be seen, she wants to be free, and for the first time, he sees her not as the girl who left, but as the woman who outgrew the version of himself he refused to evolve beyond. This is where most men stop, but some transform. The average man stops here. He numbs it out. Finds someone new. Tells himself, she was too emotional anyway. Builds a new mask over the same wound, but the rare ones, the initiated ones, they choose a different path. They sit in the silence she left behind. They listen to the parts of themselves they ignored while she was still loving them. They do the work. The shadow work Jung spoke of, not for her, for them, because they now understand, she didn't leave to hurt them, she left because they wouldn't go with her, and now the only way forward is inward. So, can he ever reach her again? Maybe. But only if he's no longer reaching from the same place. If he ever finds her again, and she feels his energy, grounded, self-aware, present, she may stop. She may look. She may even smile, but she won't come back for the man she left. She'll only meet the man who met himself. because that's the man she was always holding space for, and if he doesn't become him, then yes. She's not coming back, but that's not tragedy, that's transformation. Some women scream when they're done, some beg. Some slam doors, but the rare ones, they simply vanish, no warning. No last argument, no handwritten note left on the counter, just absence, thick, sharp, echoing, and in that silence, she becomes something more than memory, she becomes myth, not because she was perfect, but because she was real in a world that begged her to shrink. He thought her absence was the end, but it was the invitation. At first, he sees her silence as punishment, then, as mystery, then as a wound, but eventually, if he's willing to look deeper, beneath the pride, the denial, the blame, he discovers something more terrifying than losing her. She was never his to lose, because she didn't belong to him, she belonged to herself. She lent him her softness, she poured him her time, she handed him her intuition, her emotional labor, her sacred yes. And when he didn't know what to do with it, she took it back. Carl Jung would call this the moment the anima retracts. When the inner feminine, the soul, steps out of reach, not to punish, but to protect its essence from further misuse. When the woman he thought was his reflection turns out to be his awakening, her silence, then, is not rejection, it's a threshold. What she left behind wasn't emptiness, it was the beginning of his descent. After she's gone, he tries to fill the space, new faces, old habits, louder distractions, but none of it works, because what she left behind wasn't just a gap in his bed or a missing name in his phone, she left behind a question: who are you? Without the woman who loved you through your unconsciousness. And that question sits heavy on his chest at night. He begins to see flashbacks in the smallest things, the song she hummed while cooking, the way she paused before saying goodbye, the soft way she stopped asking to be seen, and eventually, the images don't hurt because he misses her. They hurt because he realizes, she saw all of him. And still tried to stay, until it started costing her herself, and now, he must face the version of him she left for good reason. She didn't break him, she exposed the break, she didn't destroy him, she simply revealed the fracture that was already there, that he needed validation more than intimacy, that he mistook attention for affection, that he couldn't hold love he didn't feel worthy of, and when she stepped away, when the mirror shattered, he was left alone with the pieces. Jung teaches us that the path to wholeness begins not with gaining something, but with the painful loss of everything false. And that's what she took with her, his illusion, his control, his safety in being misunderstood. And now, she becomes the catalyst, not the villain, not the fantasy, but the catalyst, the woman who left not with noise, but with knowing, and that knowing haunts him in the best way. It stirs him, it calls him, it forces him to sit in silence, and listen, because she became the final lesson his ego tried to avoid, not through anger, not through seduction, but through the raw, spiritual power of her disappearance. He may never see her again. But he'll never see the world the same. There will be other women, other loves, other nights, but she will live in the architecture of his transformation, every time he speaks more softly, every time he listens instead of reacts. Every time he catches himself before raising his voice, before walking away, before shutting down, she will be there, not as a ghost, but as a guardian of the man he finally chose to become, because her silence was never an exit, it was a mirror, and her walking away wasn't abandonment, it was a final act of love, for herself, and for the man she knew was buried underneath his armor. Epilogue, when he finally understands. But she's already free. One morning, without warning, it hits him, not in a dramatic scene, not with a bottle in hand or a song on the radio, but in the quiet moment between sleep and waking. He remembers her, not just her voice, not just her laughter, but the way she looked at him, before she stopped trying, and suddenly, everything clicks, the jokes she didn't laugh at, the nights she turned her back, the long pauses before she answered, the softness in her that slowly turned to steel. He sees it all, clearly, painfully, truthfully, and he whispers, almost audibly, into the silence, she was done long before she left. He finally understands, but she's already gone. It's not that she vanished overnight, it's that he stopped noticing her leaving, piece by piece, moment by moment. She was fading, and he was too wrapped in himself to feel it. Now, he does, every single inch of the distance between who she was when she loved him, and who she had to become to survive loving him. But here's the thing about awakening, it always comes late. Right after the door closes, right after the train leaves, right after the eyes that once pleaded for your presence now look right through you, with peace, not pain. She's already free, and now, she's no longer thinking about him, not out of anger, but liberation. She's found new joy, new friendships, new nights where she doesn't second-guess her worth. She's not looking back, not even in her dreams, because she didn't just leave him, she left who she became trying to be enough for him, and in doing so, she set herself free. He could try to reach out, but she's no longer there. He may write a long message, he may confess things he never dared say, he may cry, finally, not out of ego, but out of real, human regret, and maybe, just maybe, she reads it, she smiles, she wishes him healing, but she won't return, because returning would mean sacrificing the peace she bled to find. Carl Jung said, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. And now, he no longer calls it fate, he calls it what it was: neglect, silence, blindness, and finally, consequence. So, what's left for him now? Redemption, but not with her. He can't fix what he broke, he can only rebuild what he abandoned inside himself. He begins to do the work, not to win her back, but to honor the version of her who believed in him before he did. He stops performing, he starts listening, not to noise, but to truth. He goes inward, deeper than ever, and in that descent, he hears her voice, not calling him back, but calling him forward, because she wasn't the destination, she was the portal, the woman who loved him into awakening, and walked away so that he'd finally wake up. And now, whenever he loves again, it will be different, not louder, not grander, but truer, because of her, because of who she became, because she disappeared, and in doing so, she showed him who he was always meant to be.